Here we go.
You are now listening to Beast Mode Mindsets with your host, Chrissy Renee.
Hello, everyone, and I'm so glad to be back with you guys. This is week 2, Beast Mode Mindsets of Faith. And if you don't already know, Beast Mode Mindsets is just all about discussing how God activated that inner faith, your inner faith, your inner beast, and how you pull through. So, with our guests, we're just talking about different things, them sharing their journey, just how their mindset changed and how their faith, it went from being just a thing or possibly a person, but to actually be in action. And so tonight we have with us a special guest. This guest is a friend of mine I've known for quite some time. And when I say quite some time, I could say at least 10 years. And it goes all the way back to the lovely green of North Carolina Central University. So we have Matthew Prince King with us tonight. And just so you guys know, I just want to give you a little bit of background about Matthew. I call him Prince because I know him that great, and I've known him for so long. And so Matthew is originally from Greensboro. He is the child of Michael and Charles Etta King. So he is the son of a preacher. And he's a graduate of North Carolina Central University with a degree in history and a master's from North Carolina A&T in agricultural education. So currently right now, and even tonight, he's actually with us from St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. So he's been there for quite some time. But he is not just there to be there on vacation or anything. He is actually almost a year away from obtaining his PhD in creative leadership and innovation. So prior to Hurricane Irma, he was teaching, commercial aquaponics and U.S. history at a high school. But, after losing his system in the hurricane, they've been in the process of rebuilding. So just a little bit more about Matt. He's also one of the managers of Blackbeard Hotel for the duration of the hurricane rebuilding effort. And so his debut autobiography was released in October. So he has a book out. He is an author. His book is entitled Test of a Man, Memoirs of an Orphan Prince. And so even just outside of that, if that isn't enough, Matt also runs a company called Agricultural Technical. It's an agriculture technical company. And so the name of his actual company is Everybody Eats. And so he has 2 other awesome partners, Austin and Brandon. And so, Matt, are you with us tonight?
Hello, ma'am. You really make me sound a lot more interesting than I actually am in person, but I really appreciate that. I appreciate the introduction, and it's definitely an honor to be with you tonight and be able to chop it up about a very, I think, timely subject matter in regards to a lot of people's lives, this stage of their lives anyway.
Yes, most definitely. And so let me ask you this. We just going to jump right on into it. And so with the book, tell me this. When did you actually realize that you actually wanted to write it?
Very interestingly enough, a lot of people ask me, when did I start? I actually started writing that book 4 years ago. And I wrote it for my daughter. And I was, at the time, kind of going through something with her mother. And I said, if I don't sit down and write my story and tell my story, she would kind of never know my story. So the essence of the book was for me to explain who my family was to my daughter. And it took me 4 years to write. Interestingly enough, I wrote the first half of the book maybe about a year and a half. And then I never could honestly find a space where I could close the book out. But, in hindsight, that was because the book was not finished. So over the 4 years I had started it, I had entered North Carolina A&T for grad school, and I finished it up sometime early last year, and it took me maybe about 2 years. I went through 2 really, really bad publishers, so I had 2 really nightmare testimonies when it comes to publishing. But now I've remastered the book, and we're going to do a new release at the beginning of the year on a new platform. I have a way better deal for my book, but essentially the book was my opportunity to explain who my family was and how my life had become what it had become, and we'll go into that a little bit more. But that's essentially why I started to write the book.
I think that's amazing. And so you're saying it took you about 4 years. 'Cause my understanding is, different people, of course, different books, different subject matter, and this book is about you. So I know you had to actually go there. You had to actually take it there and possibly deal with some things that either you were ready to deal with, hadn't dealt with, or some people that were even around you or close to you didn't necessarily know. And so, even with that being said, I mean, I can understand how it took some time. And, with writing, I've done some writing myself. You put some things down, you come back to it like, hey, I like it. No, I don't like it, or we'll see how this goes. So, so just tell me a little bit, like how did you kind of schedule in, like when you were writing? Because I mean, you went from Central to A&T, you were in Greensboro, High Point, you're in the Virgin Islands now. I mean, you're a busy guy. There ain't but 24 hours in a day, so. How did you kind of incorporate to get that on track and get that product to where it needs to be?
I would honestly say out of probably every other project that I would probably do, this is probably the most personable one that I had worked on, and I think that from that extent, it was very therapeutic for me to be able to work on this project. So to where everything else about my life at the time was maybe more of an obligation or a responsibility. Late at night, early in the morning, when it was just me and my thoughts together, instead of just kind of letting my mind wander, I started to just put my feelings out on paper. So I had no intentions on writing the book. Let me just say that first. When I started writing my words down on the paper, I really started as writing a letter to my daughter. That's how I started out, a letter to my daughter. And that letter turned into a diary. That diary turned into 100 pages. And once I had 100 pages, I was thinking like, oh, well, we'll just go ahead and write a book. And to give a little background story on the theme of the book, like you had mentioned in my bio, I'm the son of a Southern Baptist preacher, been in church all my life. Probably been in church too much, based off my personality. But my father was a pastor of a church for 25 years. He started pastoring at 19. Didn't have a college degree, but is a very ambitious brother. He was the youngest school board member in Gifford County history in Greensboro, and he started a company called Project Homestead, maybe about when I was 3-4 years old. And the company essentially started out of the need of the church not having members who own their own homes. So his biggest thing was he wanted to make sure that people understood in the capitalistic society one of the main investments that you need to have in order to move forward and build with your family is home ownership. And it's, again, essentially the cornerstone of it. So he started a very wildly successful nonprofit called Project Homestead. They built over 600 homes in North Carolina. And he had a first home buy-in program with low-income families that he was running through the USDA, where a lot of people who essentially never would have had the opportunity for home ownership got the opportunity through Project Homestead and homes that they still own to this day. And he also became the second black Krispy Kreme franchise owner behind Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron has the first one in Atlanta, and the second was in Greensboro. And then in 2003, everything changed. So how I like to paint the analogy of my life is when I was born, my father was like this rock star figure at the time. He was a pastor going all over the country preaching, and that's what I remember the most. Our church trips, we used to go all over the country for him to go preach different places. And we're on this elevator in life, and my father was just rising star everywhere he was going. things are just getting better. Everything he touched was turning into gold. And it's almost like we were headed to the penthouse floor, and then he stepped off the elevator. And when I say he stepped off the elevator, my father committed suicide in 2003. And when he committed suicide, that for me personally was a really hard, tough pill for me to swallow, because not only was he my father, but he was my pastor as well. So I had some very interesting conversations with God, to say the least. So after my father stepped off the elevator, maybe about a year or two left, my mother had remarried, and I was the biggest mama's boy, still the biggest mama's boy. My mom was my number one girl, but I didn't get along with her husband. So I essentially moved out the house when I was 16. I really almost been on my own since I was 16. I had moved in with my godmother at the time, and she worked third shift, and I played sports.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I would get home from school in high school, she would be at work, and by the time I was leaving off school, she would be getting home. So maybe like the last 2 years of high school, I essentially raised myself. And I felt almost as if once my mother got off the elevator, I literally, like, the elevator closed to a court, and nothing about my life had been the same. And the elevator immediately fell from the penthouse all the way down to the first floor. And I remember getting to North Carolina Central thinking, like, man, nobody would even believe the fact that I'm Reverend King's son. Like, nobody, growing up, God had blessed us. I would just feel like that. We had a nice house. We had an indoor pool. We had horses, go-karts, lake houses, whatever you want to name. God had blessed my father to be able to obtain it. And it wasn't even to the extent where he allowed us to hoard it, because everybody around us got that same experience. And but after he had passed away, everything was taken materially. So I had no proof of the fact materially of who I was. So I never really said that. And a lot of other things in the paper came out about my dad that made it even more taboo for me to, at the time, admit that was my father. So I had a friend in high school named Antonio Hall. I get my whole demeanor, my silhouette, my swag, everything comes from this guy. And he was a major impact and influence on me in my life. And he was 2 years older than me. He had won Homecoming King that year. And he said, well, yeah, I'm saying, I'm the king of the campus, and you the prince of the campus. And my family referred to me as my father's second son, as Prince before, but nobody's ever called me Prince before Antonio called me Prince. So that's essentially how the name came about. And at the time, being known as Prince sounded a lot better than being known as Reverend King's son. So I started to go as Prince. No first name, no last name. If you asked me, I didn't tell you. And that's how that started. So I ended up getting a Social Security check from my dad. After he died, I think it was maybe about $1,200, $1,300. I mean, it was, to me at the time, it was a lot of money. But after I was helping paying the bills with my godmom, I didn't want to sell drugs because I was just not that type of person. But I wanted to always do something to make money. And I had two friends. God rest one of my friends, so he fortunately passed away a few years back. Barry Black. Now we just celebrated his transition a few days ago. It's my boy, but he has a twin named Sid. And one day we were in the living room, and they went to this school called Dudley High School in Greensboro, and I went to Northeast, and they was just like, we should throw a party. Derek said it. He said, we should throw a party. And me and Sid was like, what? He's like, yeah, man, we should throw a party. We'll make some money. And that summer we threw a party. All your NFL dudes from Eden came down there. I know you remember that. But we had a party at the Y that summer. And my family comes from a line of entrepreneurs. My great-grandfather was a root doctor from Barbados. My grandfather was a major figure in Greensboro for years, both on the positive and negative side. And then my father was an entrepreneur as well. So I got bit with the entrepreneurship bug in high school. And I started throwing parties, and that faded well into how North Carolina Central played in. So I'm going to stop it there for your next question, but that probably lead into the next thing you have to say.
Well, yeah, I definitely was going to go ahead and talk about that transition, because that's when I meet Prince on the scene at Central, who's handing out flyers like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, who are you? Hey, who are you? But you've always just had a familiar spirit and a familiar vibe. You've always been that person that's just like you can connect with. And even though you smile 24/7 and you laugh, I think a lot of times how we connected, or even the brief conversations we would get to have, we both understood that there was a story behind the smile on either end. And so
Correct.
it's funny that later on, I think one day when someone said, well, Matthew, and I'm like, who is Matthew? Like, they was like, you know who Matthew is, and I'm like, no, I don't know. So they're describing you up and down, and I'm going, no, that's Prince, and they're like, no, that's Matthew. And then it started to hit me, and then I remember, I think I might ask you, I was like, Prince, nobody said that, your name was actually Matthew or anything like that. And I said, you didn't tell me, and you were like, yeah, I go by Prince. That's a long story. There's, some stuff with it. And you still kept smiling. And I was like, well, you know what? That's cool. That's good. And then so over time, as, we got to know each other more. Your name was always Prince, and I'm always, how you say it, the Eden chick, because Eden is so small and it's on the outskirts of Greensboro, so we played all the games. And we came to y'all, but even at Central, there was probably like less than 5 people out on the whole campus. And so it was kind of like, me, and I know you remember Nandi, and we have another friend, Jaleesa. We entered as freshmen at the same time from Moorhead. And so people couldn't understand that we were from Eden or where it was on the map, but they knew what Moorhead was. They were like, oh, Eden
right.
Moorhead. I'm like, no, Eden Moorhead is not the name of the school. We went through all that. But, yeah, you definitely, so far, you definitely highlighted quite a few things. Because, I mean, as I was listening, you talk just about how you were at the penthouse, family-wise. And then it seemed like, hey, somebody cut the strings on the elevator, and we went down. And, definitely sorry to hear that you guys had to experience it. But it's my understanding, too, as well, with life that, every time we go through something or as we go through things, it's a process. And so sometimes even if we don't experience the things, sometimes as we experience things, we don't see it like that until we start actually getting to that place of, just different things happening in life. And then you start looking back and going, okay, well, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have kind of like picked up and got some of those skills that I have now. Because if everything would have stayed perfect, there would be necessarily no Prince, no Matthew Prince King. There wouldn't be Test of a Man, because that story came from somewhere. And so it seems like Matthew Prince King, even though you started identifying more so with Prince, it really started when your father's life ended.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. And to put another emphasis on you talking about me passing out flyers at Central, and I go about it in this book, and anybody that's interested in the book, a little bit of the breakdown is there 3 parts to the book. I break it down in Matthew's the first part that talks about my childhood. Prince is the second part, which you're alluding to after my father's death. And then the King is the last part of when I kind of put everything else together. But during the Prince era, I had discrepancies getting into North Carolina Central because of financial aid and the situation that I was dealing with my mother and her husband, to where people didn't know, but I was throwing parties out of necessity. I wasn't throwing. A lot of people thought I was throwing parties to be cool, but when I started North Carolina Central, I had $3,600 bill. So literally, I'll be passing out parties on Thursday. Passing out flyers for the party on Thursday, taking the money that I made from the parties on Thursday to pay my bill down on Friday. And the ill thing about this, and why I love North Carolina Central and I hold them so dearly to my heart, is during my orientation, there was a girl who looked at me and said, "Yo, you look like a Mr. Freshman." And I looked at her and I was like, I've never heard of a Mr. Freshman. I don't even know what that is, but. And she said, well, are you ever interested in doing something at SGA? I said, well, I come around, help around. I was, student body vice president in high school, so I'm familiar, but I don't know no Mr. Freshman. So she said, well, you need to think about it. You look like a Mr. Freshman. And at the time I had met the Mr. NCCU at the time. His name was Corey Dinkins. And the next time I saw Corey, I said, Corey, this chick at orientation told me that I need to be a Mr. Freshman. He was just like, bro, we had already been talking about it with the court. Like, yeah, bro, you need to run for it. And I was like, okay, well, in my eyes, what I looked at it as, this gives me a platform to promote more parties. I can make more money, and I can pay my bill down. I'm not really caring about anything else at the time because I'm just thinking like, okay, well, I can use that for that. And as God would have it, I won. And I remember the night that I won Mr. Freshman, we 19 years old, so what's the most we went to cookout, we balled out at cookout, everybody got a cookout straight, we up there just laughing and talking
right.
and stuff. And the way Central worked, if you remember, when you got dropped from your classes, the way it goes is like you go to class the next day and they wouldn't call your name on the roll, and that's how you know that you were dropped from the class. And in my head, that whole night, I knew that I still had like maybe about $1,100, $1,200 on my balance. So, I'm thinking, I'm celebrating, but in the back of my head, I'm still thinking like, man, I still got this balance from school. And the next day, I had, and this is all just kind of testament to faith. So although I'm not saying the word verbatim, through my testimony, I'm giving you examples of faith that have gotten me to the point of where I am with the word now.
Yes, we did. Yes.
But I had walked to class, and, everybody's congratulating me. Oh, Mr. Freshman, Mr. Freshman. And I'm in class, I'm just giddy. And all of a sudden, I sit down, and my teacher does not call my name on the roll. So I automatically know what that means. Like, I got to go home. You know what I'm saying? I can't, like, they didn't drop me from school. And I literally can count on my hand because I'm a Capricorn. Capricorn season's coming up January 10th. I'll let your boy. But at Capricorn, people tend to not be as publicly emotional. So I literally can count on my hands how many times I've belligerently cried in front of people, especially strangers. But that's one of them. Like, I literally left the class that day, and I was walking through campus, and I was bawling, crying on the way to the Union. And on my way there, I had ran into the SGA president the year prior to, my boy Mutar, and Mutar came up to me. He said, bro, what's wrong with you? And I was like, man, I can't pay my bill. I got to go home. I was over it. And at the time, there was a lady, God rest her soul, Miss Candace Roberson. She was the SGA advisor at the time. And her and this other lady, Miss Freeman, it was maybe like one other lady. These were older ladies. They were in the Union, and I had walked up to them, and Mutar walked me in. They said, man, come on, we're gonna handle it. So I'm still crying, and I walk into the office, Miss Roberson. She's like, boy, what's wrong with you? And I said, I can't be your Mr. Freshman. I got to go home. I can't pay my bill. And they all kind of looked at each other. They smirked, and they said, you ain't got to worry about that. We're not going to lose our Mr. Freshman. And Central put me on scholarship for the rest of the time I was there. So when I tell you that, like, Central took a chance on me when they didn't have to, they could have sent my yellow behind home. Every hiccup or every complaint that I could have about how that HBCU function always goes to the window for me because they didn't have to take a chance on me. And North Carolina Central really laid the foundation for me to be able to move forward. So a lot of people don't know that. I do talk about that in the story, but a lot of people don't know that, like, me winning Mr. Freshman is what kept me at Central. And it's just a testament of, like, you will go through things in life, and although we don't understand the rhyme and the reason for it, God always has purpose for what you do and why you go through things. And the timing of God, you can never quantify. And that's why I always like to back off of trying to be too hard on theology and try to, in regards to trying to define who God is, because that's such a daunting task. How do you define the Creator? And, once you kind of get to that point of humbling yourself to say, look, God has given me the little piece of Him that I need for me to be able to move forward, then you start to relax on the decisions that everything else kind of folds into. So, interestingly enough, out of all of that all of the traumatic things that me and my mother have experienced throughout life, we have a much improved relationship. We was on the phone for like an hour last night, just talking about the very things that we're talking about right now. Funny enough, my mama said the exact same thing. She said, Matt, for as much as I would like to hide you from all the hurt and the pain that you've gone through, you probably wouldn't be 28, 29 years old, getting your PhD, published author down in UV. And to me, all of these things have been survival tactics for me. None of this has been for the glory of saying, oh, I'm doing this. I'm like, no, I theoretically speaking, I could have lost my mind through what I went through, but God didn't put me in that space. He put me in another space where I could shed my light off of something very traumatic that happened. And it's interesting because I'll talk about something about the book in a minute, but a breaking news story, I guess, of some sorts. But it's interesting enough on how when God wants to put you in a space, He'll make you very, very uncomfortable at first. So, one of the things that I like to put in an analogy of, because I have an agriculture background, is when you plant a seed, a seed only sprouts out of stress. A seed never sprouts out of a comfortable environment, because it starts off as a seed with a hard shell. And the first thing that has to do is have to propagate, which means that seed has to bust open. So there's a lot of pressure that goes on to that seed with the soil and the water, but something beautiful comes out of that pressure. And one of the things that I've been personally digging into based off of how my life has happened throughout the hurricane, especially the hurricane, is really digging into the book of Job. And, I'm not really kind of pressing this from more so a religious standpoint. This is just me talking to whoever's willing to listen. The fact that I was talking to one of my deans, the dean who crossed me for my fraternity, and we were just going over things that was going on in life. I had been going through a few things as of late. This is actually my dad's death anniversary. So this is interesting enough that we've been having this conversation because he passed away December 6th. We buried him December 12th, which was yesterday. It's 14 years later to the date. I'm very into numerology and things like that, so I'm through 2 successfully 7-year completions of this situation. And I will say, although I do clam up during this time automatically and I kind of shun myself off from everybody, and I did again this year, I probably did it from more of an introspective space this time to where me and my father was able to just spend time together, and that's how I looked at it. I was like, I'm just going to myself off from the world for a second and just spend time with my dad. And for those few days this past week, we laughed, we cried, we talked, and he had shown me himself many times in regards to letting him know that my father's still here with me and moving with me. And it was it had been pretty well spoken, but it prepares you to be able to move on with life, and when things come to you, they become more familiar. God gives you that sense of discernment to let you know that sometimes when we go through life, we get caught up in a situation where we think like, yo, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And then, hours have passed, days have passed, weeks have passed, months have passed, and then all of a sudden the next, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation pops up. And over time, we don't even recognize how many times he's gotten us out of that I don't know how I'm going to get out of this situation, aspect. So I've, in my personal life, gotten to the point to start really counting small victories. And that helps me move forward because I don't want to ever get overwhelmed thinking that I can't deal with what God has given me, because that's why he put me here for. So for all of the pain and all of the things that I've gotten through, I wrote a book about it. And the funny thing is, I released it about a month ago, and people are now getting done reading the book. So I've gotten so many people calling me back and, just telling me their feelings on the book. And it's been overwhelming to me because, one, I didn't think my life was that interesting for people to read. But two, I never thought that my words would impact people like that. From my perspective, it was just me getting something off of my chest. I wasn't really even doing it for the appeasement of other people. But I am happy that they got it out. Somebody was able to get something out of it, which I know more now that through me going through that situation, I was really more a vessel of God to be able to speak to other people through different situations. Because everybody that will talk to me, people know me for 17, 20 years, like, oh, man, I didn't know such and such, such and such. And then they would go into their story and say, well, this happened to me and that happened to me. And, we would be able to connect for a nice little minute. I apologize for everybody who's been reaching out to me. I promise I'm going to get back to you. I had to take my little break back. But a lot of people have been, getting to me and sharing their testimony with me. And I think that it's just been a beautiful thing to be able to articulate each other's story, because we live in such a fast-paced life now that sometimes we do have to take time to sit down with life and figure out how blessed we are. And I think that for me, coming back to St. Thomas and in a time and a period where they're in such recovery, it humbles me again that no matter how bad my situation is, it could definitely be a lot worse.
Wow, and I will say this, Prince, you definitely hit a lot. Even just the number of completion and going through that and how you look at it, and so it's amazing to know that at your age, just at 28, there's this really big journey that you've went through, that you've been on. And of course the journey is not over at all. And so I know you have some other things that you're going to share with us and talk to us about as it relates to the book and as it relates just to your journey overall. And so we're definitely going to dig in a little bit more deeper in just a moment. So we'll be right back after this. we're back, and definitely, just like the song said, hands in the air, this is my moment, and Prince, this is your moment. We're gonna pick it right back up and keep it moving along, because I want to know more. Like, I know there's more, and so I need you to take us there. I need you to let us know what we haven't heard so far. And you said something like right before the break that really kind of stuck with me, as you were talking about your book and how it you're starting to get calls and you're starting to get that feedback about how your story made it easier for somebody else. So they're starting to tell their story, and they're like, hey, I never knew you went through that, and or they can identify with some of the things that you actually been through. And so there begins to be this therapeutic relationship between the people you're coming into contact with, not just people you've known for a long time, but your new audience, people that are getting to know you now. And so from an agricultural standpoint, and even just talking about their company, you're big on growth, and everybody eats. And so that's exactly what you're doing by planting that seed of faith, by putting your testimony out there with your book, and it's sprouting out and touching so many. And you know what? I can't wait to see exactly where it's going to go. I can't wait to see where you're going to go in life. I mean, with you, the sky's always been the limit, and I've always seen you push forward. So go ahead. Let's pick it back up, and you tell us. Continue this journey on out.
I appreciate the kind words too, by the way. I'm gonna go in a different direction for a second, and I'm gonna talk about where God had to bring me as a man in regards to what I wanted out of life. So talking about the elevator scenario, I materially lost everything that I had, everything that people know me for. Like I want to say, we wasn't filthy rich, but we were pretty well off black people growing up. And
right.
Getting to college, I had a friend of mine, still a friend of mine, my boy, and the whole time of college, his life was how my life would have been if my father was there. And at times, although I was not envious of him, I would be resentful of my own situation. And it took a long time for me to get to peace with that, to know, and to refer back to the scenario with Job. Job was one of the richest men the Bible had ever seen. He was the richest man on earth at the time, and he literally had everything taken away from him. And I think the interesting thing, okay, so I'm going to take a whole nother step back, right? And we got an hour.
Gotcha.
It's an hour show?
Oh, yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Okay, well, let me, I'm going to dig into this, right? I'm more so, because I'm going to talk about some real faith now, some real stuff now in regards to, like, somebody may be going through something tough, and I'm going to let them know that a lot of people go through tough situations that you can make through. But anybody who bought my book, they know that, one, I told you that I wrote the book for my daughter. If you flip over to the second page of the book, it's a big dedication picture of me, a picture of me and my daughter right there. I had my book release party the Sunday of homecoming. So what was that? That had to be the last weekend of October. And, I sell out my books. People coming with me. I'm autographing. I'm sending things out. I'm thinking, like, man, this is great. And unfortunately, I have been in custody court for my daughter since April because her mother is a situation. But the day after I released my book, I found out that my daughter isn't my daughter. So how I find this out is I am talking to my lawyer before I move back to St. Thomas, asking her if everything is okay with the custody court case because we were still in court and I was supposed to have my daughter for Christmas. And she says, well, no, things aren't okay. Something has happened, and they've done a 180 in this case. And now she's filing for primary custody, trying to make me take a drug test to see my daughter. Like, she really kind of painted me out to be like this little felon-type character. So I'm pretty distraught. Me and the lawyer trying to go back and forth, trying to figure out, okay, what's her angle? And we kind of just chalked it up to the fact, okay, maybe she's just holding out the case until, so I don't get my daughter for holidays. She's, shown herself to be petty like that before, so it's not a problem. But I get off the phone, and I talked to my little sister about it. And shout out to BK, Miss Shaw University last year. That's my baby. I love her so much, so proud of her.
Okay.
She's about to graduate this upcoming spring from Shaw, so shout out to BK. But I was talking to her, and she said, well, man, I don't think, and my daughter's name is Faith, and you can kind of tell that I'm still kind of going through the process right now because I'm still calling her my daughter just innately because I've been, that's how my brain has been wired. And she said, well, I don't think Faith is your daughter for another reason. And I looked at her and I said, why? Faith actually has the sickle cell disease. She has sickle cell anemia, the whole disease. And anybody who isn't familiar with the disease, in order for a child to get the disease, both parents have to carry the trait. So my sister says, well, man, you don't carry the trait to give her disease. And, unbeknownst to me, before that moment, it had never crossed my mind that my daughter wasn't my daughter. Ever, 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 ever. Never had that idea. And I immediately look at my sister, and I pick up the phone, and I call my mama, because the way sickle cell works is you get tested at birth. So, if you do carry the trait, you'll get tested. If you carry the trait, they'll test you even more. And you'll constantly get counseled on it throughout life. In regards to them letting you know, like, look, if you ever desire to get, have kids, you need to make sure that you disclose to your partner that you have the trait, because if they have the trait well, there's a strong possibility that your child have sickle cell. So I'm talking to my mom. I'm like, Mom, I don't carry the sickle cell disease. And she paused for a second, and she said, no, baby, you don't. And when I tell you my whole world kind of crashed at that moment, I mean, no exaggeration, because I had literally created my whole identity off the fact that I was a father in regards to the last 7 years. All of my decision-making, everything I did was based off of me trying to provide or become a better provider for my daughter. And I was kind of taken back. And what I'm a butcher the terminology because I'm not medically inclined to say it correctly, but she's a nurse anesthetist or something like that. She puts people to sleep. So whatever the doctor nurse is, they put people to sleep. That's what my mama does. So she's very medically inclined to know kind of what's going on. So I'm kind of at this torn war with my emotions, like, do I believe my doctor, nurse, mother who kind of probably knows what she's talking about, or do I hold on to this hope that, I didn't waste this last 7 years in vain? So to let you know how extreme I went to make sure that I got my answer, I found my birth doctor. And I don't know how many people can get access to their birth doctor or even know who birthed them, but that's how far I went. I went and found my birth doctor. And I called him on the phone, and I initially told him that I just needed it for school down here in the Virgin Islands. I said, hey, doc, I just need to know, at birth, was I ever screened for sickle cell? I need to know, for school. And he was like, yeah. And he said, as a matter of fact, when you were born, that was around the time we had just started testing African-American babies because we saw it to be a problem. And I was the only sickle cell doctor in the city, just to put emphasis on it. And he still works with the Sickle Cell Association to this day. And my mother used to work for him for years, and he knew my father for years, so he was very familiar with my family. And the way, again, sickle cell works, it's genetics. It won't pop up into anybody osmosis. It's something that comes through your family. So if you have it, somebody else through your family tree should, at bare minimum, carry the trait. And he said, no. He said, you don't carry the trait, young brother. And when I tell you, I probably asked him 6 different ways just to make sure. And I still got tested after that just to make sure. And my results came back maybe about a week or so ago. And I had to say that to lead into my Job point because I didn't want to miss some points speaking about Job. So through even triumph, like they say, no good deed goes unpunished. That is, life is all about duality. All about duality. And I was talking to my dean because I was 2 weeks ago. We talking about, again, I'm talking about real time faith, like things that I'm just now working through, like 2 days ago, 3 days ago. This is still a process of me getting even through this situation. And he was talking to me. He said, you should really get back into the book of Job and see what Job had to talk about when it came to crisis and crisis-type situations. And what you should pray for is the consciousness of Job. And he kept talking about that, the consciousness of Job, to make sure that, like, no matter what happens in life, that you always stay focused on your source and, who provides your help. And interestingly enough, like, I stayed in church my whole life, but I lost my dad when I was 14. So although I listened to him preach every Sunday, the sermons didn't quite resonate with me. I can't remember as well now as I could as a child about what he talked about, especially when it came to the subject of Job. But I've heard a lot of preachers preach about Job, and the way they've always presented him to be this courageous, bold man who never cursed God, and which is all true, very much true. But they've always presented him to be somebody who just took it on the chin. But the interesting thing is, I started reading it for myself and started to realize that, you know, Job lost his cows, his camels, his servants, all his kids. Like, got to the point where his whole body had been covered with like painful boils. Like, and when his friends went to go see him, one verse that stuck out to me more than anything else that I never had associated with Job was, they said when they saw Job, Job was in great grief. And I was like, man, nobody ever told me that Job was messed up over this stuff, or like he was struggling through this stuff. They've always just made it seem like, oh, he never cursed God and he kept it moving. Like, no, that wasn't the case. Like, Job, even through his perseverance, had struggles. He was hurt. He did, and it even got to the point where he questioned God. Like, God, like, I've done everything that you asked me to do. I dotted all my I's. I crossed all my T's. Why are you still chastising me? And it was to the extent where God still answered his question. And there's a verse in Job, I can't remember the particular the verse, the number, but it's like, you know, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And when I tell you that I had to indulge myself in that verse. And again, this ain't got nothing to do with Christianity or nothing like that. This is just a personal connection with God. And I feel like, you know, God has been around since the beginning of the time, so he's gotten pretty good at being able to reveal himself to people however he feels like he needs to reveal himself to people. I'm only man. I'm at fault. I'm a flawed creature, so I'm not about to sit here and tell anybody else how the Creator is going to reveal himself to them. But this is how the Creator revealed himself to me. He revealed himself to me through that verse to let him know, like, Matt, I've given to you before, and I've taken away from you before, and I've given to you again. So, you know, I took that verse to feel like it should have really been extended a little bit to say that, you know, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, and the Lord giveth again, because through all of Job's trouble, he got everything back tenfold. And, you know, I literally through, and for people who've been following it, I was down here in St. Thomas during Hurricane Irma, and a roof actually flew off a house and landed on my house at the beginning of the storm. So literally, I lost my roof kind of at the beginning, and that storm, that storm on Richter, because we don't categorize anything as a Category 6, it's only limited to a Category 5. But everything about that storm was a Category 6 storm. The wind power, we had 185 sustained miles per hour winds. We had 220 miles per hour wind gusts. We had 9 tornadoes. That's the one thing they'll tell you about hurricanes. They'll tell you that hurricanes produce tornadoes. So I had a tornado right behind my house that had made a roof fall off and hit my house. And God could have easily took my life on September 6, 2017, easily, without blinking. And it would have been justified. It was in the middle of a Cat 6 storm. But he didn't. He spared my life. And right after that, I got the notion to release my book. And then after releasing my book, he showed me that, you know, that wasn't my daughter. So when I say, like, literally, as I started this year compared to how I end this year, my life has literally been purged. The personal relationships that I used to have aren't necessarily the same. Of course, I'm not a father biologically anymore. I'm going through this hurricane recovery effort type of experience, but to still hold on to the consciousness of Job, to just know that, like, everything happens for a reason. There's if one situation ends, it's only for another situation to begin. And I really have been able to take solace in that in the last few days, and being able to sit down with my dad and just kind of reflect on him, on how far my family has came in 14 years, puts in perspective the season that I'm in right now. And it's very important that if you are to walk on faith, that you add the action to it, because the issue with faith is it's going to get tested. And it's never going to tell you when the test is going to come. Like, it's not going to call you like, right, man, you got this test on faith next Thursday. You need to, you know what I'm saying, go ahead and brush up on your faith skills. Like, no, it's going to hit you. Usually it's going to hit you where it hurts. And it's usually going to hit you when it's most least expected. And it's in those moments that you have to kind of dig down into whatever keeps you grounded. And I guess for me, being such a goal-oriented person, it hurt me so much because my daughter for the last 7 years had always been my driving force. So no matter what I was doing or what I was accomplishing, she was the driving force. So it really didn't matter to what the goal was, because to me, once I get done with one goal, I'm on to the next goal. I've never been the person to kind of sit around and kind of discuss my accolades or anything like that, because I feel like I got too much to accomplish before tomorrow comes. But to be a Capricorn and a goal-oriented person, one of the strangest places to be in life is to be in a place where you don't know how to express yourself and you don't know why you're doing something. So maybe for the past two, 3 weeks, maybe like the last month, I'll be honest, I probably have not been as lost in life as I have been since my father's passed in regards to my daughter not being in this particular situation. So I've almost kind of been double grieving as of late in regards to these relationships. But the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And if I stick with that, and if I continuously say that to me over and over, God will start to show me where, he took something out of my life to put something back into my life. And if I just hold on to wait to see what that is, then the purpose will become even greater. And I love down here. I talk to my Rasta men down here all the time. I love talking to my Rasta men. And one of my close Rasta friends down there, he's a fellow teacher. My homeboy Bruce, he's a mathematician, and he's really big in astrology and numbers and stuff like that. So he's an older gentleman, got kids and stuff. So me and him this past weekend, we were rapping, and I was telling him, my situation, and I was asking him for some advice, and he said, he looked at me and said, young brother, you're on fire right now. You're on fire. He said, everything that you have gone through in the last few months has been a walk through hell to put you on fire, ablaze. He said, but, when you're on fire, you have two options. You can set something ablaze, or you can shed your light. And he said, right now, brother, you ain't gonna do nothing but shine your light. And he said, that's what the fire's gonna do. He said, fire can destroy, or fire can provide light. And now you have to be on fire and provide that light to people. And I was just so something about me said, like, you know what? Because again, after I found that out with my daughter, I literally canceled everything that I had to do. I had a few other interviews and podcasts and things that I had to accomplish, and I was emotionally unavailable, so I had canceled everything. And this is the first interview I've done since the whole situation has came out. So it's a blessing to be able to share this testimony and this experience with you, but it's also even more of a blessing to be able to examine the growth that God will give you through a situation just based off of your reaction. And, I don't know how I would have reacted to this situation prior to 7 years of completion, based off of my maturity level now, because when I found out, to where a few years ago, I don't know what would have happened, God forbid, that something, my crazy thoughts would have put me to a place, but when I found out, the first thing that crossed my mind was I can't do anything crazy because I got too much to lose right now. I just released a book. I got a year left for my PhD program, and, God doesn't have me to where I felt like years before I probably would have been a lot more angry. This time I was just more hurt. I was more hurt about the situation because I felt like I had been played for years, but I didn't get played. God has rhyme and reason for everything. And the one thing that I kept questioning was, why 7 years? Why 7 years? Why would you wait 7 years to reveal this to me? And it's because I had a 7-year job to do. I was supposed to be in this little girl's life for 7 years. And once God has once God has a situation He has you done with, He's gonna make you uncomfortable, and then it's your decision how you want to move with that moving forward. And for me, he's given me a great sense of discernment when it comes to when a season is open and when a season is closed. And I'm moving into a new chapter and a new season of my life. I'll be 29 next year, and this is probably the first time in my whole life where I'm kind of in a scenario where I'm kind of living almost for my own happiness, not really for the appeasement of anybody else. And it's such a beautiful feeling to have, because when it says like God will give you the peace beyond anybody's understanding, it's certain things that you will go through life that you will call this person for advice and that person for advice, and ultimately you keep getting frustrated because you're like, nobody's giving me what I want to hear. But in all late nights, early mornings, lunchtime, when that little voice is sitting there talking to you, that consciousness is God has a voice box in you. We're part of the Creator. It's a connection. They don't understand why the hood in heaven is connected, but we do. Like, it's the connection within, innately in us, that God is why you want to move forward in regards to doing the right thing, but there's something that's in you that has to grow within you that creates that desire. And I think that when you describe turning faith from a noun to a verb, that it's a burning desire that gets you to the point where I'm ready for this faith to manifest. And, you know, I think the biggest thing in regards to, I guess, my story that I hope people take away from is, you know, I have spoke a lot of things into existence to the point where God has shown me where he's with me as long as I'm with him.
I mean, Matt, it just amazes me. I mean, and that's all I can say is wow, because like I said, I've known you for so long, and just even then to now, just like I said, just with everything that you're sharing and where you're at and everything that you've been through. So let me ask you this: so how is your daughter? Are you able to communicate with her, or where is that at, if I may ask?
Yeah, you can, and really there is no communication. The custody court case is still open, so theoretically speaking, there shouldn't be any communication. And, you know, to be honest with you, I am in a very still tough space with that. And it has been a really, really rough transition to think that I'm not her biological father anymore. And that really has kind of changed my whole personality type. I can't lie to say it hasn't, but I think it was supposed to at the same point in time. And I just have to reevaluate every aspect of my life now, because why I used to do things isn't the reason why I still do things now. And so I don't. And what I was talking to my mentor about it, and she gave me some really good advice. She said, well, you know, Matt, as bad as you want to be that little girl's father, and you can always be a father figure in her life, you know, you have to give the biological father the opportunity to be a father. And, you know, I took it, and she was like, you know, if God is going to give you your opportunity to be a father again. And, you know, that's why I say, you know, sometimes you have to let a situation go to wait for another situation to happen. And, you know, she said he's going to give you an opportunity to do it the right way this time. And I think that's what meant the most to me, because when the idea of that was my daughter, I didn't conceive my daughter out of love. You know, I wasn't ever with her mother. We wasn't ever boyfriend, girlfriend. And, you know, not to tell too much of my indiscretions, but I actually was in a whole other relationship when I had met her. So it wasn't a situation where I felt ever like she was birthed out of the love that I had for a mother, which is one of the things that I never wanted to do again. And I thank God for second chances. And honestly, I feel like within your growth, it's almost like those level ups. If you play in Tetris or Pac-Man or whatever the case may be, you go through so much stress, and you know you might be on your last life, but once you make it to that next level, everything is restored, and you know everything can hit a restoration point if you allow it to. So right now I'm really quiet. I'm still kind of to myself right now, because I just don't quite know how I'm coming off to people just yet, because I am, you know, when Capricorns get emotional, we tend to be kind of rude buttholes. So I'm trying to temper that a little bit, but more so get to the place where if she ever comes back into my life, I'm always going to be there for her. But it's to the extent where I have to kind of allow for her to do that. But she's so young right now that it's probably going to take some time. But, you know, birthday, vacation, I got all types of memories with her. So, you know, if she ever gets to the point where she, you know, that light-skinned dude that used to always be around, and she ever wants to call him, he's always going to be there. But I am also very much looking forward to, you know, God giving me this restart and what he has for me in this next season. So 2018 is definitely something I'm excited to see what God has for me.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. I mean, you know, I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad you're taking the time, even with being in the midst of something so heavy and still dealing with that right now. You took the time to just open it up, and I honestly can say because of that, I just know that you'll be blessed even more, because a lot of times we tend to shut down when we're going through things. And sometimes the very thing we need to do is open up, because I can almost guarantee that you're not the only one going through something like that right now. There's probably another father. There's probably a father listening, or another father out there that has been through what you're going through. And so by you just letting that pain out, but in the way of I understand what it is. I understand this is part of my process. And I can't say for sure exactly everything that's going to happen from this, but I know that my future is still just as bright, if not brighter, and thank God for second chances. And so tell us, I just need you to tell me right quick, what's next? I mean, I know 2018, we let's be honest, because we the same age. We ain't got but one more year, another 365.
Hey, we gotta, listen,
almost.
this one's gonna be, this one gotta be one for the books. It's gotta be one for the books.
Right. So we gonna ride it out, and I can honestly say I might have to take a trip, come down here, and see some things that you're working on, and I would love to.
It's always
love to actually see
easy excuse to get you on the beach. Easy excuse. There's no problem. I would say for me, personally, getting back to what Matt likes and who Matt is, I'm kind of on this personal journey right now in regards to, like, literally having to fall in love back with myself. And I think, it's kind of important because you kind of shortchange other people and other people's relationships when you don't have a full love for yourself. And it's not that I don't love myself. I think that I got to the point where I don't know why I love myself, because of everything that I used to do was kind of always based off of doing it for somebody else. So Test of a Man, Memoirs of an Orphan Prince will be re-released in January. I had a terrible publishing experience. So I redone my whole publishing, redid the whole book. It's going to be redesigned. It's remixed. New pictures. It's going to be lit. So I'm dropping it again in January. I apologize for everybody who still hit me up for the book. I promise you that you're going to get your copy. I promise you. But a lot of people still trying to order the book. Then Test of a Man 2, Memoirs of an Embattled Father, is in the lab right now. And Test of a Man 2 will be out by next homecoming. So it's ironic to where I never even pictured myself to be an author, to the point where I got probably about 4 or 5 book concepts in my head right now. But I'm going to release these 2 before I graduate. And then I have comps in May. So literally this is probably like, anybody who's familiar with PhD programs or something like that, this is our big test. So everybody please say a prayer for me. So I'm about to get back into the back cave a little bit and get my mind right, because I made it to this last lap, and I don't want what I've gone through in life personally to affect what I've already accomplished for myself. So I got a year left in my PhD program. I'm going to go ahead and knock that out. Shout out to my partners, Brandon and Austin, and Jehudi. We got some big things coming from Everybody Eats. Our company's been on Shark Tank. We've been Forbes Magazine under 30. Like we've been making some moves as of late. So to really kick that back into high gear, and we're gonna see after this PhD program where everything takes. But I'm a lay low for this next year and get the book out, and probably go around and definitely catch up on promoting the book some more and get done with this program. And 2019 is going to be a really good year. Spring 2019, once I graduate, I'm warning the whole world. I'm warning the whole world, y'all. Yeah, that'll probably be that's gonna be the day that we make some things happen. So I don't want to reveal everything, but just know we got some really good things in store. And I didn't want to give too much away from the book, so I'm telling you, like, there's a lot more to the book than what I disclosed today.
And we can't wait to hear more and see what comes out from the book and everything else. So, Matt, I definitely have your information listed. It's going to be listed on Beast Mode Mindset so people can get in contact with you. And so we just want to thank you again for being with us tonight and sharing your story, your testimony, and being so open. And, I'm always here for you. I love to have you back talking more about your next books and everything as they come out. So we're not going nowhere. You're not going nowhere. It's a family environment. Beast Mode Mindset. Let's get it. Let's go. Have a great night. Everyone listening, have a great night. Be blessed. You have our prayers and all our love, Matt.
Much love. Thank y'all for having me. Much love to the world. Let's make this a better place. FUTW. Let's go.
Let's go.
We do damage, we do damage. Yeah, this is pure motivation. Tell me why you waiting. Tell me why you waiting. Tell me what you waiting on. Tell me why you waiting. I mean what I say and I say what you waiting on. You gotta go get it, don't sit down now. You gotta go get it, don't sit down now. You gotta go get it, don't sit down now. You gotta go get it, don't sit down now. Another level, take it to another level. 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 Do it, let's go. You can 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 do it, let's go. You are Victoria, I am Victoria. 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 Let's go, God. This is pure motivation. Tell me why you waiting. Tell me why you waiting. Tell me what you waiting on. God, this is pure motivation. Tell me why you waiting. Tell me why you waiting. Tell me what you waiting on. Do it, you can do it. No excuses, no more losing. Who you fooling? Keep pursuing. I can see it, I can see it. See it, no drama. I don't need it, I don't need it. This that hard work season. This that hard work season. This pain for a reason. This pain for a reason. Yeah, pain for a reason. This pain for a reason. Blood, sweat, and tears and praying I said it. Blood, sweat, and tears and praying I said it. Almost at the finish, I can smell it, I can smell it. Almost at the finish, I can smell it, I can smell it. Sacrifice made, you can make it, you can make it.